Hello everyone, and welcome to the CSS Security Mini Briefing, where we will present a short summary of what was released today, August 9th, 2022. My name is Josh Daniel, and I'm a risk manager in the customer service and support organization here at Microsoft. We're going to start this video with an overview of the release, and then we'll dive into a few vulnerabilities. Please note that the details of the vulnerabilities that we are covering in this video may change, and the authoritative location for information will always be the online content in the Security Update Guide. Alright, so August 2022 brings us a total of 124 vulnerabilities, and that's quite a bit larger than what we've been averaging over the past 13 months of just around 78 vulnerabilities. And so some of these number counts are going to be higher just because the total number of vulnerabilities is higher. For example, with remote code execution vulnerabilities, these are the ones that typically provide the most risk. They allow a threat actor to install applications and all kinds of other bad things. We've been averaging just around 24 of these a month. This month, we have 32 remote code execution vulnerabilities that are being addressed. When we look at the critical vulnerabilities, we've been averaging six critical vulnerabilities per month. And this month, in August, we're addressing 17, so quite a bit higher than what we've been seeing over the past year or so. Next, we'll look at the scores of the vulnerabilities. Microsoft uses an industry standard scoring system. It's called the Common Vulnerability Scoring System, or CVSS. It's a scale between 1 and 10. This month, the highest rated CVSS score is 9.8 on that scale of 10. And we've been averaging around 9.45 over the past 13 months for that high point. The average score across all 124 vulnerabilities this month is 7.17, which is right in line with what we've been averaging over the past year or so. When it comes to publicly disclosed vulnerabilities, there are two in the set from today that were publicly disclosed prior to release, and that's just a shade lower than what we've been averaging. And when we look at exploited vulnerabilities, this month there's only one vulnerability that's known to be exploited at time of release, and that's just a hair below what we've been averaging, about 1.2. Now, when we look at today's release, and that's the slide we're looking at now, those of you that have seen this slide before, seen this video before, you'll recognize that the lower half, or maybe even the lower 2/3 of this chart, will be the Windows products. And as we can see, we have a mixture of different vulnerability classes that are being addressed this month, or impacts. We have remote code execution, elevation of privilege, information disclosure, security feature bypass, and a few denial of service vulnerabilities to round it out. As we move up the chart, we see Microsoft Office making an appearance as it usually does. Microsoft Exchange Server has a handful of vulnerabilities this month. .NET Core, Visual Studio, as far as developer tools, have vulnerabilities this month. Azure Site Recovery, the VMware to Azure component, has 34 vulnerabilities that are being addressed this month. The System Center Operations Manager, or SCOM, has a vulnerability that's being addressed this month. And finally, .NET Core 6.0 and .NET Core both share a vulnerability that's also being addressed this month. So let's dive right into some of these vulnerabilities from today's release. The first one I will talk to is CVE 2022-34715. This is a remote code execution vulnerability in the network file system. This was privately disclosed to Microsoft with no known exploits out in the wild. As we can see here, the base score of 9.8 on a scale of 10, extremely elevated. The attack vector is over the network. The attack complexity is low. Privileges required is none, and user interaction is none. There's a slight mitigation here in that this vulnerability is not exploitable in NFS version 2 or version 3. It's only applicable to version 4.1. So if for whatever reason you have 4.1 turned off in your environment, you would not be affected by this vulnerability. But that's not a great mitigation, because a lot of you out there are using 4.1 or all of the versions. No known workarounds have been documented for this vulnerability, As far as affected software, it's only Server 2022. It's not the older versions of Server, and it's not applicable to desktop versions. Next, we'll talk about CVE 2022-30133. This is another remote code execution vulnerability, this time in the point-to-point protocol. This is a critical vulnerability, privately disclosed to Microsoft, with no known exploits out in the wild. This is another vulnerability with that 9.8 CVSS score. The attack vector is over the network. The attack complexity is low. Privileges required is none, and user interaction is none. There are no known mitigations for this vulnerability, but there is a slight workaround here, and that this vulnerability can only be exploited by communicating via port 1723. And so if you disabled port 1723, that would block this attack vector. As far as the affected software, it's all versions of Windows that are in support, from Windows 8.1 up through Windows 11 on the desktop side, or Server 2012 up through Server 2022 on the server operating systems. And finally, the third vulnerability that we'll talk to today is CVE 2022-34713. This is another remote code execution vulnerability, this time in the Microsoft Support Diagnostic Tool, or MSDT. This one was publicly disclosed and exploitation was detected prior to release. And so that's the big reason why we're showcasing this one. The base score is 7.8, so significantly lower than the previous two we've been talking about. But again, that publicly disclosed and exploitation detected flags is why I want to highlight this vulnerability here. The attack vector is local. The attack complexity is low. Privileges required is none, and user interaction here is required. So a threat actor needs some kind of action for a user to take in order to leverage this. There's also a blog. If you're interested, there's a link, and I'll include it at the end of the slide deck or at the end of this video as well. But essentially, this vulnerability here is a variant of the vulnerability that was publicly disclosed and fixed a little bit time back that may have been publicly talked about as dog walk. So again, this is a variant of that dog walk vulnerability. It's unique and different from that previous vulnerability, but we just want to clear that up, that it's not dog walk, but it's very similar to that vulnerability. As far as affected software, it's all versions of Windows that are in support, from the desktop side, Windows 8.1 up through Windows 11, and on the server side, Server 2012 all the way up through Server 2022. All right, that brings us to a close for the vulnerabilities that we're going to talk today in today's release from August 9th, 2022. I want to thank all of you for tuning in today, and I will talk to you all next month. Thank you.